Secretary will read now Senate Bill 315.
Senate Bill 315 by Senator Thompson on the 14th and others. A bill entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 6 of Chapter 9 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to computer crimes so as to create the new crime of unauthorized computer access, to provide for penalties, for change provision relating to venue for computer crimes, to provide for forfeiture and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute Senate Bill 315, a bill entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 6 of Chapter 9 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to computer crimes so as to create the new crime of unauthorized computer access, to provide for exceptions, to provide for penalties, to change provisions relating to venue for computer crimes and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Bartow County, the senator from the 14th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Today I bring before you Senate Bill 315, Unauthorized Access to a Computer, better known as a snooping bill. See, this is a result of a hack that happened at KSU, and working in conjunction with the Attorney General over the last several months, it's been determined that we needed this legislation. The state of Georgia is one of 3 states where it is not illegal for me to hack into your computer. It is if we're in your computer and we move data, remove data, manipulate data, but to snoop, it's not. We've worked very diligently with the technology consortium of Google and Comcast and many others. We've had input from universities to address any research concerns. We've got support from leadership on both sides, and the Attorney General is waiting for this kind of provision so that we can make sure that we do not have another situation that happened with KSU. This is a pretty straightforward bill, ladies and gentlemen. What this does is it makes a misdemeanor out of accessing a computer when you're not authorized. I repeat, unauthorized. You hear a lot of things on the ropes. You've seen a lot of things that's come from email from groups such as Electronic Frontier Foundation. It's a radical group out of California, which is a few members. If you look at some of the members of it, they're titled as activists, and that's where you're hearing a lot of this noise. The support from the universities and others here understand if this was a concern when it comes to research, you'd hear from places like MIT. It has not slowed any of them down. So ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your favorable consideration for Senate Bill 315. And with that, Mr. President, if there's no questions, I'll yield to well.
Thank you, Senator. No question. Oh, there is a question. Chair recognizes Senator from the 56th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I will.
Senator, isn't it true that in serving as a Chief Information Security Officer that I know well that what you're saying will not impede any type of research, any type of work by ethical hackers, and it actually draws the right line to making sure we're protecting both our citizens, our businesses, and those out there trying to help both?
Senator knows what he speaks.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from the 6th for a question.
Does the senator yield?
I do.
Senator, under SB 315, if a person accesses a computer or computer network without authority, is it true that they commit the crime of unauthorized access?
If it's unauthorized, that is correct.
And isn't it true, will the senator further yield?
I will.
Okay. Under SB 315, if a person commits the crime of unauthorized access, he or she could be imprisoned for up to a year and fined up to $5,000.
If that's correct, could.
Will the senator yield?
I will.
Under SB 315, isn't it true that computers and computer networks are so broadly defined that they include ISPs, iPhone apps, websites, phones, iPads, tablets, Facebook, Gmail, Instagram, Twitter, etc.?
I'm not sure how broad it is that you're stating, Senator. I don't define that, and it's not defined in there how broad that really is with Facebook and others. Right now, the reason we have this is we are an anti-hacking. That's what we're addressing. We're anti-hacking, pro-business. We're not seeking to in any way limit business.
I understand that, Senator. Do you further yield?
I do.
But isn't it true pursuant to OCGA 16992, which is the preceding code section that actually defines each of the terms in SB 315, that the way computers and computer networks are defined, that they are defined so broadly that it basically encompasses any computer use in terms of everyday Georgians or Americans?
The senator knows what they speak. I'm not an attorney, so if that's what you're saying it says, then yes.
Isn't it true that will you yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that pursuant to OCGA 16992, again, the definitions that go along with SB 315, that without authority is basically tied to user agreements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with whether or not this is going to be tied to user agreements, but again, it's very narrowly written, unauthorized access. I think unauthorized is pretty easily understood when it comes to the legal profession. You're either authorized or you're not.
Will you yield, Senator?
I will.
Isn't it true that with respect to this bill, that very specifically the term without authority is defined in the preceding code section?
If the senator knows what they speak.
And in terms of 16992, will the senator yield? Sorry.
Yes.
That really it ties criminal liability to the violation of a user agreement.
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're speaking of.
Will the senator further yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that nobody reads the terms of service or user agreements and that they change all the time with respect to ISPs or computer programs, Facebook, Instagram, and the like?
Senator, I would disagree with that statement. Right now, what we've had is we had many of the companies that have user agreements come in and weigh in, and we made necessary adjustments and had some amendments and a substitute to make sure we took in the concerns of those that had user agreements. So we took everyone into consideration. We met. Again, Google, Facebook, Comcast, all of them weighed in on this.
Will the senator further yield?
I will.
And so you took into account Google, Facebook, and the like, the very people that are actually going to be able to define what is criminal liability and what is not. Is that true?
I don't believe that's correct. I think your prosecutors would determine that when you get into a court if someone does have unauthorized access. I don't believe the companies will define that.
Will the senator further yield?
I will.
And if I am correct, that without authority is actually defined by user agreements and defined by the companies that you have said have no problem with this statute, would that in fact be giving them the power and delegating them the power to determine what in fact is criminal conduct in this state?
Is there a question there?
If I'm correct, that in fact a violation of a user agreement can serve as the basis for criminal liability, would that not be putting in the hands of Google, Facebook, et cetera, these very businesses that you consulted with, the ability to determine if someone goes to jail or not?
Senator, we have what-ifs every day in court systems, and we can what-if this to death. The fact of the matter is this is a very simple bill. We're one of 3 states that do not have this legislation. We are anti-hacking. We are seeking to prevent people from having unauthorized access. We're not recreating the wheel. We're behind. We're a spare tire trying to get on the side of the car.
Will the senator further yield?
I will.
Senator, I'm not trying to stay in the world of what ifs, but I am trying to stay in the world of due process in the Constitution of this state and of this country. And with respect to that, notice is necessary in terms of determining whether or not someone is going to be subject to criminal liability or not. Would you agree with me that if the user agreement can continually change pursuant to whatever the business thinks it should be, that that's not appropriate due process under our U.S. Constitution?
I think what would be appropriate is for us to pass this legislation to prevent people to have unauthorized access to someone's computer.
Does the senator further yield?
I do.
Would you agree with me that if this somehow opened up a challenge for constitutional vagueness because the language in and of itself does not provide appropriate notice to people in terms of criminal conduct, and that if we had a hacker who was then brought up on charges that then was able to get out from under those charges because of a lack of specificity of the statute, that would be problematic?
Senator, what I will agree with is that we're going to disagree on this. Mr. President, with this, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to yield the well and ask for favorable consideration on this bill.
You do have a couple of other friendly
Okay.
questions, I suspect. Chair recognizes Senator from the 29th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Senator yield for a series of questions?
I will.
Senator, isn't it true that law enforcement agencies and prosecutors make decisions on the violation of criminal statutes, not private entities?
They do. Thank you.
And Senator, looking at Section 92 that was referred to earlier, it has a series of definitions. It does define without authority, and it defines without authority to mean including the use of a computer or computer network in a manner that exceeds any right or permission granted by the owner of the computer or computer network. Is that your understanding of that definition?
That is correct, Senator.
And of course, 92 also further defines the term computer and computer network, does it not?
That is correct.
And I won't belabor the entire definition of computer, but it defines it the way we would think of as a single-use desktop or laptop computer. But it defines computer network, does it not, to say a set of related, remotely connected computers and communications facilities with the function and purpose of transmitting data among them. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And so that would not include online social networking services, would it, Senator?
I don't believe so, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th for a question. To your left.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Senator, on line 13 of your bill, it actually says that the person accessing a computer has to have knowledge that access is not authorized, correct?
That's correct, Senator.
So a third party could make this decision regardless because you have to actually know you don't have permission to access this computer, correct?
That is correct, Senator.
Thank
Thank you for pointing that out.
Senator from the 41st, the minority leader has a question.
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I was engaged looking over some other legislation. Is it true that you refused to yield any more questions from the senator from the 6th?
I did.
Is the reason for that because you thought that her questions were inappropriate in some way?
No, Senator. I think that I gave her adequate time to be able to ask her questions.
Senator, is this body not an open and fair process where we try to get to the facts of each piece of legislation?
Absolutely.
Senator, don't you think that you owe it to the members of this body to allow them to hear important information and to give everybody a chance to try to derive at more knowledge and more understanding of this complex legislation?
Senator, with all due respect, I think we went through hearings. We had open dialogue. We were open to anyone that was interested in seeing this. This isn't the 40th or 39th day. This is simply presenting the bill on the floor. I think anyone that had an interest in this had plenty of ample opportunity to come and educate themselves on it. But thank you for
Senator,
your
is
question.
it not true that myself and many other members of this body disagree with you and feel that we should have had a chance to learn more about this bill than you're evidently willing to share with the public?
Senator, I think the public is well aware of this. This has been publicized. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask your favorable consideration for this bill.
There is an amendment that has been authored. Secretary will read. Senator from the 6th, if you would, please approach. Secretary of the Senate has a question. Hold on, Senator. Step out. Secretary will read the amendment.
Amendment 1 by Senator Jordan VI and others offers the following amend the committee substitute to Senate Bill 315 by replacing lines 12 through 14 with the following. B.1. Unauthorized computer access. Any person who maliciously and intentionally accesses a computer network by circumventing a computer code-based restriction, password gate, or other technical barrier shall be guilty of the crime of unauthorized computer access. That concludes the order.
This is a late arriving amendment. You should see it up on the screen behind us. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 6th speak to her amendment.
Mr. President, members of the body, I rise today not because I have a problem with what this bill seeks to do. I actually absolutely agree with it and think that it is a significant problem in this state and across this country with respect to folks trying to access and hack people's computers or computer networks. What I have issue with is the fact that the way it is drafted without authority goes back to the original definition in 16992, which basically puts in the court of a private business the ability to determine what is criminal conduct and what is not. Understanding that at the end of the day, law enforcement folks make the determination whether or not they're going to prosecute or not prosecute a case, it still goes back to the elements of a crime. And one of the main elements of the crime here is actually whether or not someone violated a user agreement or some other type of agreement with respect to how someone can use a computer or computer network. This is a problem that is seen throughout the country in terms of federal statutes and other state statutes, and without authorization or without authority has caused problems throughout, with courts and judges constantly trying to figure out what exactly those terms mean. And while you may sit here and think, well, I know what without authority means, what your without authority is something very different than someone else's. And at the end of the day, it is about what comes out of this chamber and the integrity of the bills and the laws that we pass to make sure that they provide adequate due process and notice to those who may be charged under this law eventually. With that, I will open myself up to questions.
There are some questions. Chair first recognizes Senator from the 56th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Absolutely.
Senator, you mentioned in your questions earlier to the bill's author that no one read terms and conditions when they downloaded software or apps. Is that not true?
I said as a general matter.
Senator, will you yield for a series of questions?
Sure.
Senator, have you ever traveled through Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport?
Absolutely.
Have you read the entirety of what you can and cannot bring and all the laws liable to the TSA going to the security checkpoint?
No, I haven't.
Senator, would you agree that if you walked through that checkpoint and you had one of the items they found to be illegal, you would still be in trouble for that?
Yes, and
Thank you, Senator. My next question would be, Senator, if you're going to discount that if you do not read the rules, but you then are still liable to the rules, wouldn't it be true that we would all fall in that for every law that we have?
the issue with your premise, Senator from the 56th, is that the user agreement is not law. And with respect to any of the laws in terms of TSA, I am charged with knowing them as a U.S. citizen. At the same time, with respect to user agreements that can change daily by private parties, it is not enough in terms of putting people on notice.
And thank you, Senator. You actually answered my question for me, which was next, which they aren't, in fact, laws. They are a user agreement by which the user gets to determine whether they want to, either freely or by purchase, to download that software. So they accept it. At that point, it is not a law, and henceforth, if it's not a law, it would not be considered criminal to begin with. Is that not true?
Not true in the way you've stated it, because what we're doing is we're actually making the private user agreement an actual element of a criminal law here, and that's what makes it different. You're basically piggybacking on a private agreement between a user and or a computer owner or computer network owner, and then making that criminal
Well, Senator, if you'd yield for a couple more questions, they're actually apples and oranges and not correct, but isn't it true that 47 other states do this already with very consistent language, and we as Georgia, being only one of 3 states, would clearly just be catching up to be consistent with the rest of them?
I do not agree, and I have a 150-page law review article that refutes that.
So, Senator, you say that there are not 47 other states that have this type of law, in fact.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying there aren't 47 other states that use this language because it is problematic.
And, Senator, last question. Isn't it true this bill passed out of committee with 100% unanimous vote, both Democrats and Republicans?
I have no doubt, Senator.
Chair now recognizes the senator from the 29th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes.
Senator, can you tell me, in the existing official code of Georgia annotated, is the term computer code-based restriction defined anywhere in the code? Would I be able to find that somewhere?
No, you won't.
How about the term password gate? Is that defined anywhere in the code?
No.
Okay. And then the language maliciously and intentionally, I think I'm reading that correctly, that changes materially from the underlying bill what a law enforcement agency would have to prove to bring a charge under this proposed legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it would make it would be more burdensome for the law enforcement agency to do that because they'd actually have to demonstrate malicious intent, not merely that someone accessed a computer or computer network without authority.
Absolutely right.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair now recognizes the senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the Senator yield?
Yes.
Senator, looking at your amendment, I'm sorry, but my mic isn't working here. It is now. It is working? Thank you, Mr. President. My question regarding your amendment is whether or not it materially changes the underlying bill.
No, it doesn't, in the sense that it's still going after hacking. What I'm trying to do is actually make it where there is a very specific notice as to what is criminal activity in the confines of this statute and what is not. By calling on user agreements between private parties, it's really uncertain exactly what establishes criminal liability and what doesn't. So the whole intent is really just to make sure that folks know what they can and cannot do by looking at the very face of this amendment or this bill.
Senator, further yield?
Yes.
Senator, I will admit to you, I am one of those who use these devices. I haven't taken time to read all the legalese that they have in these user agreements. So what I hear you saying is, for those people like me that don't take the time to read all that language or really understand what's in those user agreements written by corporate attorneys, that this is a common sense approach to improving the underlying legislation. Is that correct?
That is correct. We just don't want any unintended consequences here where we criminalize conduct that we did not mean to criminalize.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th for a question. Wow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes.
Senator, I have a serious question about your amendment that I just want to know your opinion on what this does. Based on your amendment, I think the underlying bill, if someone accessed a computer that didn't have a code restriction or a password, that would be a criminal act. But under your amendment, if someone does not have a password on their computer, is accessing that still a criminal act?
In terms of this amendment, what it seeks is if there's any kind of technical barrier whatsoever in terms of accessing someone's computer. But even apart from my amendment, with respect to the prior iteration of the bill, or SB 315, in and of itself, that actually may not be a criminal act either.
Will the senator yield further?
Sure.
Can you explain what you mean? So even under if your amendment were not to pass, if someone does not have a password, do you think that is a criminal act if someone accesses that computer without a password?
No, what I'm saying is that it goes back to the user agreement or the access that has been granted one way or the other by the owner of the computer or the owner of the computer network. But if there aren't any permissions in place one way or the other, then no, it can't be the basis of criminal liability.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 7th, your seatmate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to follow up on the line of questioning from the senator from the 19th to my distinguished seatmate. Do you yield?
Sure.
In regards to what the senator from the 19th said, and I'm going to take it out of lawyer terms, I'm going to put it in simple terms that a country boy from South Georgia understands a little bit. If I got a computer in my office and I have it and it is not password protected, and let's just say you can walk in my office and you can hit the mouse and my computer comes alive, if you go in my office and you were to access my computer in that way, the way I read your amendment is that would not be unauthorized access. Is that correct?
Arguably, it would not be, Senator, but also it would not be unauthorized access under the bill as written currently.
So I would follow up that question and ask, because the way I read the current bill, it would be considered unauthorized access because it is not password protected. There's no barrier in place that you have to go through to access that computer. So under the current language, then what would prohibit it from being an unauthorized access?
In terms of SB 315, to go back to that, without authority is defined as exceeds any right or permission granted by the owner of the computer or computer network. So with respect to your hypothetical in terms of someone being able to access your computer, if you haven't laid out any policies or procedures or any kind of agreement with the person who's actually trying to access your computer, then it wouldn't fall under this statute in the first place, and it wouldn't be without authority per this statute.
I respectfully disagree, Senator, but I'll yield the floor, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 14th for a question.
Senator Yield.
Yes,
Senator, are you familiar with the incident that happened at KSU, Kennesaw University?
I am.
Are you also familiar that the student had passwords when he accessed the network?
Yes, Senator, and I also, that's why the whole
That's
code-based
the only question I
restriction.
asked. Senator, do you further yield?
I further yield, but I'm not quite sure if this is a cross-examination or an ability to actually answer your
I'm
questions.
not an attorney. I'm just leading to a question.
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me be clear. She has the floor, so you can ask a question, and she has the opportunity to respond.
I understand.
So, Senator in the well, you can respond to the question
Thank you.
if you so yield.
Senator Yield?
Absolutely.
Okay, so since this student had passwords, is it not true that they're finding it difficult to prosecute this student because under the current statute, it was not unauthorized access? They were granted access because he had passwords even though he was not supposed to be in it?
Senator, I'm not fighting that this is not a problem that we need to take care of. But the issue, I don't take any issue with that. Yeah, I think it's a problem and it needs to be taken care of.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 48th for a question.
Will Senator yield for a question?
Sure.
I wanted to follow up on the questions being asked by the senator from the 7th District. You indicated to him that if someone had gone into his office and accessed his computer without his authority, that would not be a violation because of the way unauthorized access is defined in the code. Is that correct?
Under this particular code section, in terms of SB 315, in terms of specifically what's being proffered here in terms of the new law, SB 315, I'm not saying that there isn't some other code section that would be implicated here and that would actually offer a basis for criminal liability.
Will Senator yield for another question?
Sure.
A moment ago, you recited from memory that exact code section and quoted it to the senator from the 7th District, the definition. Will you give that again, please?
I can read it to you. Without authority includes the use of a computer or computer network in a manner that exceeds any right or permission granted by the owner of the computer or computer network.
Will the senator accept another follow-up question?
Sure.
So under that definition, if he did not grant permission to the person to access his computer, they would be violating the law, whether he had policies in place or not, because the code puts the burden on the prevents access unless permission is granted. Is that not correct?
That's not correct. It says that exceeds any right or permission granted. It pre-assumes that there is a right or some type of permission granted between the user and the computer owner or the network owner.
So if the senator from the 7th is the owner of the computer and he has not granted permission to the person that accessed the computer, how would that not be a violation of the law according to the plain language of the code section you just quoted?
If there is some kind of communication between the user and the owner or some kind of agreement, absolutely. But this preassumes that in this language. So if somebody just walks into your office, you're not there, and they use your computer, which is what the hypothetical was, then no, it doesn't fall under the strict language of the statute. And with respect to criminal liability, these statutes have to be strictly construed.
Will the senator yield for another question?
Absolutely.
Isn't it true that the code section requires the person accessing the computer to have specific permission from the owner of the computer?
No, it doesn't.
Is that not the plain language of what you just read out loud to the...
No, in a manner that exceeds any right or permission. Like I said, it assumes right or permission to access. I'm not saying that this is good language. That's part of the problem here. Part of the problem is that this definition of without authority is not appropriate with respect to SB 315.
Will the senator yield for another question?
Sure.
The difference that I noticed between the bill that's before us and the amendment that you've offered is the addition of the word malicious. Do you envision a scenario under which it would be permissible for someone to access a computer without permission and it not be malicious?
Yeah. For example, if there's a website, we know with the alcohol and tobacco websites now, when you go to them, you have to put in your age, that you're over 21 in order to access it. If I'm 19, 20 years old and I want to go to that website and I lie about my age, okay, and then I access that website, I'm not doing it with maliciousness, but unfortunately, under the language of SB 315, I would be subjected to criminal liability. And that's just not okay.
Will senator yield for another question?
Sure.
I'm not sure that a website fits within the definition of either a computer or a computer network as currently defined in the code. But other than protecting people who are underage from accessing tobacco websites, are there any other scenarios under which you think it'd be appropriate to protect them from liability?
Look, I go back to criminal liability should not be premised on private user agreements and private contracts. We should not be handing over the authority to actually determine what is criminal and what is not to businesses out there. That's just what it comes down to.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 29th.
Mr. President, I'd move the previous question.
I can't move the previous question while she's in the well. Senator, you wish to continue to yield for questions? You have Senator from the 33rd for a question.
Who's 33rd?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, will you yield?
Sure.
I'm a little bit of a novice at this, but I remember in the military, if we left our desk and we had a computer on, a lot of times we'd have classified and sensitive information on there. And if I didn't lock my computer and I left and somebody came and accidentally maybe, and information was on that desk, then I would be the one in trouble, not the person who accidentally hit it, computer. So basically I'm just trying to look at scenario, and I'm a novice at this, but if I walked into your office and let's say your screen is up, and I'm saying, where's the senator at? And there's information on there, such as defined by this law, would I be liable to prosecution the way this bill is written, even though it was accidental?
In terms of SB 315 or the
Right.
amendment? Probably not, just because I'm not sure that there's any predefined terms between you and I in terms of what you have permission to see or not see. But in terms of the amendment, that's where the malicious and intentional comes in, because in terms of folks just doing stuff accidentally or accessing websites they shouldn't be, they shouldn't be criminally prosecuted for that. And if people that are acting maliciously actually do authorize information that they're not allowed to authorize, then they should be criminally prosecuted.
Thank you for your response, and I hope that we could all work together and try and craft this bill so when it goes to the House that it'll have smooth sailing. Thank you for your help with this.
You want to yield the well, Senator, or you want to continue? Senator from the 6th.
Are there any more questions?
There's a senator from the 20th has a question.
I'll yield
It
to
may
him.
be a friendly one. He's got a friendly face. He's got his hair slicked back nice today. Chair recognizes Senator from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm feeling good today. Glad to be here. And Senator, would you yield
Sure, Senator.
for a question or questions? I'm just trying to get an understanding because of how this might impact me and my business. I'm in the insurance business, and we have subscriptions we pay for rating services or management system, et cetera, and we have to sign user agreements to access over the internet these programs, and sometimes they specify that we each have to have our own separate password.
License.
And we have to we're supposed to only log in using our password, and that's the way they control how many people in the office can access the program at one time, and also that's how they determine how much we pay. So if we want to have 2 seats, we pay a certain amount of money. If we want to have 4 seats, is what they call them, we pay more. My concern, I guess, after hearing all this conversation is if I forget my password and my username and password, and one of my employees tells me, well, just use mine today so you can get in and do what you need to do, would I possibly be violating the law and be subject to criminal prosecution? Or
Under SB 315, you would be. But that's why I put the malicious and intentional language in there, because obviously it would not be malicious on your part in terms of a violation or trying to access information that you may or may not be entitled to.
Okay, thank you.
Senator, there are no further friendly questions.
I yield the well. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. Very, very good debate that has ensued in the Senate. Senator from the 29th has moved the previous question. All those in favor of the previous question, rise, stand to be counted.
Tape. Mr. President.
Senator from the 28th, what purpose do you rise?
No. Wave off.
Reverse. On the motion for the previous question, the yeas are 30 and the nays are 0, and the previous question has been ordered. Question now is on amendment number, Chair recognizes Senator from the 28th. What purpose you rise?
Mr. President, I move for the yeas and nays.
For what?
For the amendment.
Amendment 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shall the yeas and nays be sustained for amendment number 1 the Senator from 28 has requested? If you're in favor, rise, stand, and be counted if you would like the yeas and nays. Clearly, 5 have voted. All those in favor of amendment number 1 will vote aye. Those opposed, no, and the Secretary will unlock the machine. This is Amendment 1, authored by the Senator from the 6th, Senator from the 22nd, Senator from the 41st, and the Senator from the 19th. On amendment number 1, authored by the Senator from the 6th and others, the yeas are 20, the nays are 33, and the amendment has lost. Question now is, clear the screen if you would, please. The question now is on the adoption of a committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Now, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is the objection agreed in the Porter Committee, which fail pass the bill? Chairs none in the Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? Chairs none in the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Question is on the pass of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the pass of the bill, the yeas are 41 and the nays are 11, and this bill, having received the constitutional majority, is therefore adopted.